May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be ever glorious in your sight, O Lord, our Creator and our Redeemer. Amen. What a beautiful sight. Sorry, it's my first time back in the pulpit with people. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful sight. So great to see you all and be with you. Sorry, that's not my sermon, but I just, was overwhelmed. So back in January, my kids and I started fostering a little puppy. Her name is Fig. And pretty quickly, I knew in my heart that it was going to be a foster fail. And she continues to be a joyful gift to our household. You can hear her excited gallop of little paws on the hardwood floors as she gallops down the hallway, chasing a ball or seeking one of us. And you can hear and feel her energy before she even enters the room. And when she sees you, it is pure joy. Her excitement and joy and desire for connection are communicated through her perked up ears, the grin on her face, the swing of her tail, so exuberant that her entire back half is wiggling back and forth. And then, of course, her jumping up and mouthing your arm to greet you. She is a puppy, after all. But in her mouthing, she gently holds onto your arm or hand, and she is saying, I want to connect with you. I insist on connecting with you. You are everything to me. And then she will attempt to cover you in kisses, holding your arm down gently with both paws as she attempts to kiss every part of your hand. Imagine what would happen if we greeted everyone we met in that way. Grins on our faces with complete joy reflecting through our eyes, an insistent handshake or hug, even a wiggle to our bottoms, all to communicate the utter joy and desire to connect with that person. To communicate through all of our being that this moment, right now, you are everything to me. You are sacred. Imagine what sort of interaction and conversation might come out of such recognition of the other as sacred, as beloved. This requires from us a different rhythm of engagement as we move through our days with both attention and intention to see and connect with each person who comes into our day. Jesus prays to God on behalf of us all in this gospel. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. As you have sent me into the world, so I have sent them into the world. Jesus calls upon God to sanctify us, all of us. To sanctify is to make holy, to separate from common use and devote to God. To be sanctified is to become more fully aware of who you are and whose you are. You are a beloved creation of God, of the God who is the source of life and of liberating love. Dr. Claudio Carvallis theologian and professor at Union Theological Seminary, writes, Jesus calls us into sanctification, which is the becoming of who we are in God. Sacred people living in a sacred place with all forms of sacred life without distinction. I love his idea of sanctification as a journey of becoming. Sanctification recognizes who we already are deep within our being, when all of the facades and false identities are stripped away. We are each beloved, each unique iterations of God's divine love. But this idea of sanctification as becoming, which is an active verb, becoming who we are in God, this is what it means to be God's people, to know ourselves to be sacred people living in sacred places with all forms of sacred life. Becoming who we are means an ongoing commitment to continually seeking to know ourselves and one another more fully, spiraling deeper into discovery and recognition of our rich, deep wells of love and energy and mutuality and interconnection. This seems like a complicated way of describing a very simple, embodied way of being. It is a way of being that moves us away from our own dehumanization, away from all that keeps us separated from our humanity. Dehumanization allows us to, gives us a way that serves empire, a way that decenters us, desensitizes us, and serves as a means for us to devalue one another and become deaf and blind to suffering and oppression. The way of embodied, sanctified being that Jesus calls us to draws us into our own humanity. It reorders us. It remembers us, puts us back together in such a way that we remember that we are sacred and beloved of God, and that all others are sacred and beloved of God. It is a simple and yet profound way of living into the truth of who we are, the truth of love. One of my favorite Alicia Keys songs talks about this in her song Underdog. The song moves through simple everyday interactions that are transformed by recognition of the sacredness of the other. Listen to this verse about a taxi ride. She's riding in a taxi back to the kitchen, talking to the driver about his wife and his children, on the run from a country where they put you in prison for being a woman and speaking your mind. She looked in his eyes in the mirror and he smiled. One conversation, a single moment, the things that change us if we notice when we look up sometimes. God is not calling us to be extraordinary, but is calling us into the ordinary. One conversation, small moments of being fully present to our humanity and that of another as we move through the everyday moments of our lives. This is a way of being that moves us away from transactional way of being to a relational way of being. The societies and systems of the world tell many of us each day that we are not of value, that our voices, our very beings, don't count as much as another's. Jesus sanctifies us, each and every one of us. We have been and are still being made holy by God. The chorus to Alicia Keys' song continues, "So I sing a song for the underdogs, for the hustlers trading at the bus stop, single mothers waiting on a check to come, young teachers, student doctors, sons on the front line, knowing they don't get to run. This goes out to the underdog. Keep on keeping at what you love. You'll find that someday soon enough, you will rise up. Rise up. Everybody, rise up." While empire says that some are of less value, less power, expendable, Jesus proclaims that we are all of ultimate worth. He calls us to life in God, moving us into that relational way of being where all God's people are of ultimate worth, are beloved in our humanity. Poet David White says, "Being faithful to the way we are made is the most courageous conversation we can engage in." Being faithful to the way that we are made is the most courageous conversation we can engage in. We move ever more deeply into the heart of God when we see one another and hear one another's stories. Because in those stories, we hear our common struggle, our common desire to be seen and valued, our common yearning for deep, abiding love. That is where the heart of our humanity lies. A relational way of being brings us more fully into our humanity and ever more fully into becoming who we are in God. So let us go out and embody the sacred, sanctified people we are and continue to seek the sanctity in all God's people. Amen.